The city lights shimmered across glass towers, promising success and opportunity to anyone willing to chase it. Beneath that glitter, thousands of migrant workers carved out quiet lives, balancing long hours with unspoken sacrifices. Among them was Lina Moreno, a 29-year-old Filipina bartender whose laughter could carry across a crowded room, yet whose private struggles were known only to a few. For Lina, the lounge where she worked had been both a stepping stone and a weight, pulling her into choices she never imagined when she left her homeland. Have you ever been in a situation where the person who should have supported you slowly became the very reason you felt trapped? That was Lina's reality. She came with dreams of sending money home, caring for her mother, and funding her younger brother's education. Like many, she carried the hopes of her family on her shoulders, telling herself that every night she endured at the bar was one step closer to building a better life back home. But while she poured drinks and smiled at strangers, her own life was slipping into a dangerous corner she couldn't easily escape. At the heart of her story was Omar Halim, the lounge owner. Twice her age, he presented himself as generous and dependable, the kind of man who could open doors in a city where everything came at a cost. Their relationship began quietly, built on late-night conversations, financial help, and whispered promises of security. What started as comfort soon revealed its darker edge. Omar's attention shifted from affectionate to controlling, his support from generous to possessive. Lina found herself answering endless messages, accounting for her whereabouts, and quietly withdrawing from friends. What had once been companionship became suffocating. This story is not just about a crime. It is about imbalance, power, and the invisible lines crossed when someone confuses love with ownership. It's about the risks faced by people who work far from home, whose visas and livelihoods depend on employers who hold both their paychecks and their futures. Lina's life reminds us of the delicate balance between survival and freedom, between choosing silence and risking everything by speaking up. Before we go further, I want to pause and ask something important. You're here listening to Lina's story because stories like hers matter. But many people will scroll past without realizing the weight behind these moments. If you're watching this, I ask you not just to listen but to support. Subscribe to this channel, leave a like, and share this video so her story, and others like it, won't be forgotten. And if you choose not to subscribe, I genuinely want to know why. Drop a comment explaining your reason. Because staying silent when others' voices are already silenced only repeats the cycle. Now, imagine sitting in Lina's place. Would you have had the courage to break away from someone who provided both your paycheck and your housing? Would you risk everything you came for, your family's future, just to reclaim your peace of mind? These are questions Lina faced, and the choices she made would prove to be the most costly of her life. Tonight, we follow her steps, from hope to heartbreak, from confrontation to tragedy, and we uncover the lessons hidden within a story that is both personal and universal. Stay with me until the end, not just for Lina, but for yourself. Because the truth is, we all know someone who has faced moments where leaving felt harder than staying. If you're still watching when I ask later, I want you to drop a comment saying, "I'm still here." It may seem small, but it shows that her story reached someone who cared enough to stay. This is the story of Lina Moreno, the young woman whose search for independence collided with one man's refusal to let go. The cracks in Lina's private world appeared slowly, almost invisibly. At first, Omar's messages felt flattering. He wanted to know where she was, who she spent time with, when she would get home. But soon, those questions carried an edge of accusation. Why didn't she answer immediately? Why did she laugh with another bartender? Why had she spoken to a customer longer than necessary? For Lina, every shift at the lounge became a performance, not just for paying guests but for the man who held her contract. She began confiding in Nora, an older Filipina who had been in hospitality for years. Nora warned her gently that mixing work and personal life often ended badly, especially when the employer had more power. Lina listened but felt stuck. Omar wasn't just her boss. He was also her landlord, her sponsor, the man who had helped with her rent when money was tight. To cut ties wasn't as simple as walking away. It meant unraveling nearly every safety net she had in a foreign city. But Lina's resolve strengthened when Omar's possessiveness grew harsher. He discouraged her from seeing friends, dismissed her family's needs as excuses, and spoke of her future as if it belonged to him. She realized she was being managed, not loved. Each time she ignored his messages, he showed up angrier the next day. Each time she expressed doubt, he doubled down with guilt, reminding her of what he had done for her. Gratitude was turning into a leash. The night she reached her breaking point wasn't marked by any grand event. It was simply exhaustion. She had worked a 12-hour shift, smiled through the noise, and swallowed the frustration of a customer who mocked her accent. By the time Omar texted, demanding to know why she hadn't called him, something inside her snapped. She typed a reply with shaking fingers. "We need to stop this." For Lena, it was the bravest message she had ever sent. She knew Omar would not take it lightly. She rehearsed what she would say when they met. She would thank him for his support but explain that she needed freedom, that she couldn't continue hiding, lying, and living under constant pressure. She reminded herself of her goals, her mother's medicine, her brother's tuition, her own sense of self. She wanted to end things with dignity, believing Omar would eventually understand. But those closest to her feared otherwise. Nora warned her to be cautious, not to meet him alone. Another colleague suggested she wait until she secured a new job. Lena listened, nodded, but quietly decided she would confront him face to face. It was the only way to reclaim control of her life. That decision carried her into the most dangerous night of her existence. The evening of April 18th began like any other shift. The lounge was busy, music blending with chatter, the clinking of glasses echoing across the room. Lena moved gracefully from table to table, her practiced smile hiding the storm inside. She had made up her mind. After her shift, she would meet Omar and end things once and for all. Omar had already been watching her that night. He sat near the bar, his eyes following her every move. Colleagues noticed his presence but avoided comment. His visits had become more frequent, his stares more intense. Lena tried to keep her distance, serving customers while ignoring his attempts to catch her eye. Each minute felt heavier, as though the decision she had already made was pressing down harder with every order she filled. When her shift ended just past midnight, Omar insisted on driving her home. Lena hesitated. She wanted the conversation in a neutral space, but refusing him outright might raise suspicion. She reluctantly agreed, hoping she could keep the exchange calm. The drive was quiet, filled with unspoken tension. Finally, outside her apartment, she asked him to stay in the car so they could talk. She spoke carefully. She explained her gratitude but said she needed to step away, that their relationship was affecting her work and her peace of mind. She told him she valued her independence and could not continue under constant control. Her words were steady, but inside, her heart raced. Omar's reaction was swift. His voice rose, questioning her loyalty, accusing her of betrayal, demanding to know if there was someone else. Lena tried to reassure him, but his anger only grew. Witnesses later recalled hearing raised voices near the parking lot, a sharp escalation that unsettled neighbors who had already grown used to his late-night visits. When words failed, Omar's fury turned into action. In the heated argument, he struck her. A neighbor later said she heard a cry that cut through the night. In moments, the confrontation escalated beyond anything Lena had imagined. He lashed out repeatedly, his rage silencing her pleas. The confrontation ended with Lena lying motionless, her final breath stolen not by chance, but by the deliberate act of a man who could not accept rejection. Panic set in. Omar attempted to conceal what had happened, dragging her inside her apartment to stage it as something else. He left hastily, but the scene was already marked by chaos. A tipped chair, shattered glass, a trail of evidence that would betray him. It wasn't long before Lena's absence raised alarms. Nora, concerned when Lena didn't answer her calls, went to check on her the following morning. The sight that greeted her would haunt her forever. Authorities were called, and the apartment quickly turned into a crime scene. Investigators pieced together the timeline, speaking to colleagues, neighbors, and tracing the last messages Lena had sent. The picture became painfully clear. This was not an accident. Omar was apprehended later that day. He denied responsibility at first, insisting their relationship had been loving, that he had done nothing but support her. But the weight of physical evidence, witness testimonies, and forensic analysis told another story. The marks of struggle, the bruises, and the timeline of events left little doubt. For Lena's family back home, the news arrived with devastating force. Her mother collapsed upon hearing that her daughter, who had promised to return with pride and financial support, would instead be coming home in a coffin. Her younger brother, once so inspired by her sacrifices, struggled to understand how love could turn into violence so absolute. In court, Omar's demeanor shifted from arrogant denial to a hollow defensiveness. He painted himself as a man betrayed, wounded by love. But the truth was plain. Lena's only betrayal had been the desire to be free. The judges saw through his narrative, and the sentence reflected the gravity of his actions. The trial dragged for months, reopening wounds each time her name was spoken. Her colleagues testified about Omar's constant presence at the lounge. Her friends spoke about the control he wielded, and Nora shared the warnings she had given Lena. Each testimony painted a portrait not just of a single violent night, but of a pattern of control that built toward tragedy. When the verdict was finally read, justice felt both real and hollow. Omar received life imprisonment, but Lena's absence remained. No sentence could restore her laughter to the lounge, her voice to her family, or her dreams to reality. Justice was served, but it was late and it was incomplete. Before we move on, I want to pause again. If you're still with me right now, type in the comments, "I'm still here." It may sound small, but it tells me Lena's story hasn't been ignored. And while you're here, I urge you, don't just listen. Hit the subscribe button. Because when stories like this are told, it's not about views, it's about voices. Each subscription tells me you want these voices remembered, not erased. The morning after Lena's death, investigators faced a complex but solvable case. Unlike unsolved mysteries where evidence disappears, this crime was built on layers of mistakes Omar made in his panic. The apartment spoke loudly. Overturned furniture, streaks of blood wiped in haste, personal belongings left out of place. His attempt to stage the scene as a burglary fell apart within minutes. Forensic teams documented the injuries. The bruises and wounds didn't align with Omar's initial story of an accidental fall. Instead, they revealed blunt force trauma, consistent with an assault carried out in rage. Phone records provided another damning layer. Dozens of messages sent by Omar in the hours before Lena's death, filled with demands and accusations. His last unanswered call came only minutes before witnesses reported hearing a loud argument outside. Colleagues at the lounge were questioned. Many hesitated at first, fearful of retaliation, but gradually the truth came out. They described Omar's repeated visits, his tendency to monitor Lena, and the tension that grew over weeks. Nora became a central figure in the case. She provided screenshots of conversations where Lena confided about feeling trapped, messages that proved Lena had been preparing to end the relationship. The trial began 6 months later, filling the courtroom with both local press and migrant worker advocates. For many, Lena's case was more than a crime. It was a reflection of systemic issues faced by women working abroad, whose employers often hold immense power over their daily lives. Omar's defense team attempted to shift blame, portraying him as emotionally unstable, arguing that his actions were fueled by temporary passion rather than deliberate intent. But the prosecution dismantled this narrative point by point. They argued that Omar's control, threats, and the final violent act were not the result of one emotional outburst, but of months of escalating possessiveness. Witness after witness strengthened the prosecution's case. Nora's testimony, delivered through tears, carried the weight of foresight. She had warned Lena, and now she was recounting those warnings before the court. The forensic expert detailed the injuries, explaining that Lena's final moments showed resistance, indicating she fought for her life. When Omar finally took the stand, his contradictions unraveled his defense. At first, he insisted he left her unharmed. Later, confronted with forensic timelines, he admitted to an argument but denied intent. Each shift in his story weakened his credibility. By the closing arguments, the courtroom had little doubt where the truth lay. The verdict was delivered on a humid morning. Omar was found guilty of murder and sentenced to life in prison. The room was filled with quiet sobs, not only from Lena's friends but from strangers who had followed the case. For her family, justice provided some closure, but no comfort. Their daughter's sacrifice, meant to uplift them, had ended in tragedy thousands of miles away. News outlets covered the story widely, sparking debates about migrant workers' safety, employer power, and the importance of support systems. Advocacy groups pointed out that Lena's death was not an isolated incident but part of a broader pattern where women abroad face unique risks. Risks magnified by dependency on those who exploit vulnerability. The court's ruling set an important precedent, but the pain remained. Lena's family received her remains in a wooden casket, accompanied by embassy staff. Her mother clutched a framed photo of her daughter during the final rites, her cries echoing across the cemetery. It was a moment no verdict could heal. Lena's story became a point of reflection across communities. Social media carried her name, turning her final struggle into a reminder that silence enables control, and control often escalates into violence. When news of Lena's death reached her hometown, disbelief turned into grief that touched every corner of the small community. The village that had once celebrated her courage in moving abroad now gathered in mourning. Relatives and neighbors filled the family home, offering comfort, but no words could replace what had been stolen. Her mother's voice broke as she explained again and again how her daughter had gone abroad not for herself, but for them. Each story shared by neighbors painted Lena as more than a provider. She was remembered as a daughter who had kept her family together through her determination. Her younger brother, once inspired by her sacrifices, struggled with guilt. He admitted to friends that he wished he had told her not to go, wished he had begged her to stay. For him, the money she sent home every month now felt like a cruel exchange, their gain at the cost of her safety. The funeral was crowded, not only with relatives but with teachers, classmates, and villagers who had admired Lena's courage. Her coffin, draped in white cloth, was lowered into the ground while church bells rang slowly. Her father stood silently, his face carved with pain. He had been proud of her resilience, proud of her choice to support them, and now he was left holding memories instead of a daughter. Across the city where she had worked, her colleagues also mourned. The lounge where she had spent so many nights now felt hollow. Her absence was a wound that couldn't be covered with music or lights. Patrons who had seen her smile behind the counter brought flowers, laying them outside the entrance. Even the owner, usually strict and reserved, broke down when speaking about her loss. Nora, her closest friend in Dubai, carried the heaviest burden. She replayed every warning she had given, every moment she had urged Lena to walk away sooner. In her mind, each conversation turned into a haunting echo of what might have been. Though she had no fault in Lena's decision, guilt wrapped around her, making her grief even harder to bear. The case also stirred larger conversations. Advocacy groups picked up her story, using it as a symbol of the challenges faced by migrant workers. Her name was spoken at rallies, her photo held high by those demanding stronger protections for women working abroad. Her death, though deeply personal, became a public cry for change. At the same time, in online communities, strangers connected with her story. They shared their own fears, their own close calls with partners who demanded too much control. For many, Lena became more than a victim. She became a mirror reflecting struggles faced in silence. Here's where I want to pause and ask you directly. If you've ever felt powerless in a relationship, or know someone who has, let this story be a reminder that silence can cost lives. Please drop your thoughts in the comments. And while you're there, let me ask, why haven't you subscribed yet? If you're listening to Lena's story and you value her life enough to want lessons remembered, hit the subscribe button now. It takes 1 second, but it ensures her memory isn't lost in the endless scroll of the internet. Her community eventually built a small memorial beside the church. A simple plaque carried her name and the words, "She worked for love, and love took her from us." People still leave flowers there, proof that even though her life was cut short, her impact continues. Lena's story isn't just about a crime. It's about choices, sacrifices, and the fragile line between love and control. She left home with dreams of lifting her family from poverty. She endured long shifts, smiled through exhaustion, and sent every possible coin home. That sacrifice deserves admiration. But her tragedy also forces us to ask difficult questions. How many others are living in situations like hers, too afraid to walk away, too hopeful that things will change, or too dependent to break free? Control doesn't always begin with violence. It begins with small demands, monitoring, and the slow erosion of independence. Omar's actions were not born in a single night. They grew from unchecked jealousy and manipulation. The lesson is clear. Independence is not selfishness. Protecting your freedom is not ingratitude. And walking away from someone who suffocates you is not betrayal. It is survival. Lena believed she could manage Omar's anger, that her patience might calm him. Instead, his need for control escalated until it consumed her. For viewers, the takeaway should be more than sadness. It should be action. If you recognize similar patterns in your own relationships, speak up. Seek help. Trust the unease that tells you something isn't right. Too often, victims convince themselves that things will improve. But silence gives abusers power, and control left unchecked becomes violence. For families, Lena's case is a reminder of the hidden burdens carried by those who go abroad. The money they send back is not just numbers in an account. It represents nights of exhaustion, sacrifices of personal safety, and in Lena's case, her very life. Families must recognize these sacrifices with gratitude, but also with awareness. Encourage your loved ones to protect themselves, to set boundaries, and to place their well-being above all else. For communities, her death highlights the importance of conversations. Talking openly about control, jealousy, and violence is uncomfortable, but necessary. When we share stories like Lena's, we chip away at the silence that allows these patterns to continue. This is where I'll remind you again, don't just watch silently. Type in the comments, where are you watching from right now? These stories connect us across countries, across time zones, across cultures. Let's create a community here that values safety, freedom, and respect. And please don't leave this video without subscribing. If you've made it this far, you clearly care. Subscribing is your way of saying her life mattered, that her story should continue to be told. Lena's dreams will never be realized. She will never return home with the wealth she promised, never watch her brother succeed, never repay her parents' sacrifices. But her story can still mean something if we let it teach us, if we let it guide us toward protecting those still alive, still vulnerable, still in relationships that echo her own. We've reached the end of Lena's story, but not the end of what it means. She was more than a statistic, more than a headline. She was a daughter, a sister, a friend. She carried dreams larger than herself, and though those dreams were stolen, her memory can serve as a shield for others. Her story is heavy, I know, but weight like this shouldn't be carried alone. Share this video. Share it with someone you know, because maybe, just maybe, it will spark the courage for someone to walk away before it's too late. If you've stayed with me until this very moment, thank you. It tells me you understand the importance of remembering her. But don't stop there. Like this video so her name rises in the algorithm, subscribe so her story lives beyond a single upload, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss the stories still to come. Lena's life ended in tragedy, but her story can continue as a lesson, a warning, and a call for change. Let's honor her not just with tears, but with action. Thank you for watching.